I hope this finds everybody doing well today on this nice, beautiful Wednesday afternoon or morning or evening or whenever you're watching it, Saturday, Sunday, whatever. We're going to talk about kites today. Cut lesson short yesterday. Well, same shirt on I had on yesterday, I guess. I guess I'm doing it today. Cut short the lesson that I did earlier today with you because it just got a little bit too much. So we're going to take the opportunity now to go through kites and talk about the different properties of kites and do some of the different things that, that kites kind of do. So we'll start out with the definition of a kite. Kite is a quadrilateral that the two pairs of consecutive congruent sides, but opposite sides are not congruent. So what does that all of it means? And again, think of this as a kite. You know what kites look like that fly in the air? It's kind of what it is. But when we're talking about kites, the kites themselves, you're going to have two pieces that are going to be congruent to each other. So two pairs of consecutive congruent sides. So the consecutive congruent sides in this case are considered to be K and L and L and M. Those are consecutive sides. And those two sides are congruent to each other. And in this case, JK and JM are congruent to each other as well. Okay, so that's considered to be a kite. Now, keep in mind that when you're looking at these kites, the other thing is that opposite sides aren't parallel to each other. Aren't congruent to each other. So JM is not the same as KL. Okay, those are not going to be congruent to each other. And you can look at kites in different ways. Here's another example of nice straight lines that's going to make a kite. So those two consecutive sides are congruent, and those two consecutive sides are congruent to each other. So that's kind of a basic definition of what a kite is going to be. Those pieces are congruent, and you can see in this drawing that there's other things that are on this drawing kind of as well, but we're going to talk about them here in the next slide. So one of the rules then, if it is a kite, the diagonals are perpendicular to each other. So if I draw the two diagonals in there, and you can see them in this drawing, they are the orange dotted lines or red dotted lines. Where these two diagonals meet, they meet at a 90-degree angle. So the measure of that is going to be 90 degrees, and that's always going to be the case with the diagonals of a kite. If they're not perpendicular to each other, it's not a kite anymore, it's something else. But that angle right there always has to be 90 degrees when we're talking about a kite. So, you look in there now, really we have four different right triangles that are created. And really a couple, other things that are going on there that could possibly help us find things as well, and different pieces of it when we're talking about a kite. So that's rule number one. Rule number two, if a quadrilateral is a kite, then exactly one pair of opposite angles are congruent. So in this case, angle K, which they say JKL, that's going to be congruent to angle M, JML. Those two are going to be congruent to each other. The other ones aren't congruent to each other. Okay, so J and L, they're not congruent to each other. And how do you know which ones they are? It's where the two congruent pieces change. Okay, so we've got KL has two ticks, JK has one tick. Where those two come together, that's going to be the angle that's congruent to the other one that's on the other side. And they're going to have, meaning they're congruent, meaning they're going to be obviously then the same measure in that type of situation going on. So kind of our three rules that we have: consecutive congruent sides, diagonals are perpendicular to each other, and exactly one pair of opposite angles that are congruent. Rule number three, if a quadrilateral is a kite, the non-congruent angles are bisected by the diagonals. Okay, so in the last one we said that these two angles are going to be the ones that are congruent to each other, because these two pieces are congruent and these two pieces are congruent. So we know those two angles are going to be congruent. What this rule is saying is that the non-congruent angles, they actually are bisected by the diagonal. So if I tell you that the measure of this is 10 degrees, the measure of this is going to be 10 degrees. Okay. The measure of this one is 60 degrees, the measure of this one's going to be 60 degrees. They're going to be congruent to each other. So they give you the whole thing, you just kind of cut it in half if you want to know the measures of those different angles. Okay, so 3 rules that we have to have for these. Rule 1, opposite consecutive congruent sides. That's rule 1. Rule 2, diagonals are perpendicular to each other, so they meet at a 90-degree angle. Exactly 1 pair of opposite angles are congruent, again, where the 2 come together. And then the non-congruent angles bisect each other or cut each other in half. So those are the rules that we got to live with. Let's go ahead and just look at a couple of examples. We're not going to look at a lot of examples, so this is going to be a really pretty 10-minute lesson. Maybe if we even make it 10 minutes. Let's just look at a couple of examples. It should look familiar. Problem 4, 5, and 6 in your assignment. So we have in a kite, WXYZ, measure of angle XY, WXY is 104, and the measure of VYZ is 49. Find the measures of those angles. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find WXY. WXY is this angle right here. That's 104 degrees. So I'm just going to go ahead and think about my definitions and what do I know? Opposite angles, that they're congruent to each other. So that means that this one right here is also going to be 104 degrees. Okay? So we know that's 104 degrees. They also tell us it's a kite. So since it's a kite, I'm just going to put that that's 90 degrees. And that's going to kind of go around the board for all of these. They're all going to be 90 degrees. The last thing it tells us is that V, where's V? VZ, or VYZ. So VYZ, I'm going to make this in blue. VYZ. They're telling me the measure of that angle right there is 49 degrees. So if I know that one's 49 degrees, I know that one as well. That one has to be 49 degrees. Okay, now let's answer the questions. And now let's start by marking the first one in green. Question number 4 says VZY. So this angle right here. Well, they tell us that whole angle is 104. That doesn't really help us. But what we know that this one is 49. And we know that one is 90. So the interior angles of a triangle have to add up to 180. So if I take 180 minus 49 minus 104, that's going to give me the measure of angle 4. 180 minus 49 minus 104 is 27. So that tells me that that one's 27 degrees. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little arrow right there because I know that that's 27 degrees. And now I'm just going to kind of think about what I know. This is 104. That's the whole thing. And if that's 27, that means I can find that part right there. It's 104 minus 27. They might not even ask for it, but they might. So I know that's 77 degrees. Okay. Next one, it says VXW. There's V, there's X, and there's W. Well, if you'll notice, we know that that's 104, and we said that this angle is 27. These two angles are going to be congruent to each other, so this has to be 77 degrees. And then the last one we'll highlight in pink is XWZ. I don't know where X is anymore because I can't see these things anymore. Let's kind of erase here. XWZ. So there's X, there's W, and there's Z. Okay, so let's figure these things out. So we knew this is 90, and we said that was 77. So 180 minus 90 minus 77, that's going to give us this one. It says that one's 13, and because that's a diagonal, it bisects it. That's 13. 13 plus 13 is 26. There's your answers. Okay, so you got to keep the definitions always in your mind about what's going on with those different things and with these different pieces. All right, let's look at the next one. So let's think about what we know. We know that this angle here is 74. We know this angle is 39. We know this angle right here is 90. So angle 1 is pretty simple, right? 90, 180 minus 90 minus 39. So angle 1 is equal to 51 degrees. That's pretty easy. We also know that this is 90 degrees. And this angle here is going to be the same as that one, so that's 74. So angle 2 is going to be 180 minus 90 minus 74. So angle 2 is equal to 16 degrees. So there's kites and what you're going to have to do with the different kites. So you'll be able to finish up your assignment now. The one that was on Tuesdays on 4-6. You should be able to finish that up, keeping in mind our different rules that we have for a kite. Okay, 2 pairs of consecutive congruent sides. Diagonals are perpendicular to each other. Opposite sides, opposite angles are congruent. Again, it's where the 2 come together. And then the diagonals bisect each other, kind of on that non-congruent side. So go ahead and get your assignment done. We will see you tomorrow at, well, I don't know, whenever you're watching this. I guess we'll see you Thursday for the next lesson. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe out there, and we will see you next time.